What's up everyone? Welcome back to my robot survival game, where you try to survive on an island while protecting your home. In my last video, I started to make the game feel more unique by leaning into the robot specific features and making it possible to give food to the boy that you're protecting. But what are we even protecting the boy from? Well, wait a second. I think I hear something. That's right, this video will be all about making the first enemy of the game. As you can see, I currently only have the default being, not really a threat. Until I add a little angry face, now he's an enemy. Now I just have to work on the enemy's AI. To start, I just made a simple script that finds the player and moves towards it. Literally took 6 lines of code. Coding AI is just too easy, I guess. And just by adding one more line of code, I made it face where it was moving. And it's looking pretty good. Well, almost good. What's happening? I just had to tweak the code a little bit so it doesn't rotate on the y-axis. Now technically this is already an AI, but it's still a dumb one. It will get stuck on anything that's in between it and the player, which isn't really good, especially if we're going to be building walls later. So I went on a mission to learn how to do proper pathfinding and found nothing. Everywhere I looked told me to use the same thing, a nav mesh. While nav mesh is a super cool feature, I don't think it will work for a game that has randomized terrain or a game that lets you build. But lucky for me, I took one artificial intelligence class in college, so I know there's another option. A-star pathfinding. Oh boy was I wrong. There is no world where pathfinding should be this difficult. So after hours and hours of trying to figure it out, I decided it would be best to just move on and come back to it later. Running into objects isn't the worst thing. Instead, I started working on the enemy's state machine. We don't want the enemy to chase you from all the way across the map, especially once we add more enemies. So instead I gave them an idle state. In this state, the enemy will randomly pick a point close to its spawn and walk to it. It will then stay there for a few seconds before finding a new space to walk to. This just gives them way more personality than if they were just sitting there like, put me in, coach. For the next state, I had to make a way to trigger them to chase you. This actually wasn't too bad. I just threw out some raycasts in a cone shape, and if you stepped in one, the enemy would start chasing you. Lucky for you, they can't hurt you yet, but you can run far enough away so that they'll turn around and return to spawn. I did run into a small problem where the raycasts would just shoot into the terrain. To fix this, I just added more raycasts. Is this the best way to do it? I don't know, I'm just making it up as I go. But it does kind of look like a rave if you put more enemies in. Okay, that's enough of that. Moving on. The enemy still needs to be able to attack, so I made a new state. This state is activated when the enemy gets close enough to the player. In this state, the enemy will constantly be looking at you, but won't get any closer. Then in random intervals, it'll throw out an attack. I made a quick placeholder animation where he leans back to wind up and then headbutts forward. The red box is just so you can see the hitbox, so if you make contact with it, you take damage. Obviously this could use a lot more juice, but getting it to work is important. But since the enemy can attack now, it'd be lame if you couldn't defend yourself, so I made it so your attacks do damage to it too. I did find a funny bug that since the enemy only has raycasts in the front, you can just come up behind it and beat him up and it'll never attack you. While it's kind of funny, this isn't a good mechanic, so I made it automatically change states if it's attacked. Now one enemy is cool, but in the real game there will be many, so I threw in a few more and gave him a proximity ring that alerts all nearby enemies, so you can't just pick off one at a time. They're gonna notice if you're fighting one of their companions. This then leads to another problem. You can just get completely swarmed. Other games fix this by only allowing a few enemies to attack you at the same time. Look at Elden Ring or Batman games for example. They only let a few enemies attack you at a time to keep it fair for the player. Imagine if you walked into a room and 10 guys just jump you. Not very fun, I imagine. To implement this in my own game, I just gave the player a counter for the number of enemies currently attacking it, and the enemy will check this before going in for an attack. Now only 4 enemies try to attack you at the same time, while the others just root them on from the sideline, and they'll tag in once another one dies. Or when all of them die, I guess. Give me one sec. Alright, all fixed. That shouldn't happen again. I also added some code for when the enemies can attack things that aren't the player. But that's for another day. For now, the enemy can attack you and you can attack it. But what about the defensive options? Well, I could just add a shield. Or I could just try to impress Donkey and get the attention of his new publishing company by adding a dodge roll.
That game was terrible because it didn't have a dodge roll. This game has a dodge roll.
Adding the animation was easy, but making it move the character was a bit more difficult. I finally realized all I had to do was track what direction you last moved in, and then push you in that direction. This is called through an event in the animation, so we'll be in sync with it. I also made it so you couldn't get hit while you were mid-roll. However, this isn't a get out of jail free card. There is still time before and after the roll where you're still vulnerable, so you can't just rely on spamming it. It isn't quite perfect yet, but it's passable. And with that, I think it's time to give this humble little bean a makeover. I wanted the first enemy to be fairly simple, so I basically just made Karen from SpongeBob. I then made an animation similar to what I had for the bean, where it leans back and then headbutts forward. Again, the red box is just so you can see the hitbox. I then thought it'd be cool to give the enemy faces so you could easily tell what state it's in. Now he makes a little angry face when he chases you. While testing all these features, I realized that the combat felt awful, and I just couldn't quite put my finger on what was causing it. It was more than just the bad animations, but I realized that you had to be moving towards the enemy in order to attack at it, or else you'd just be looking away. I was having trouble figuring out how I wanted to handle this, so I took a look at another third-person survival game, Valheim. That game makes the player face wherever the camera is pointing whenever you attack. I really liked this solution, so I went yoink and put it in my game. I can't express how much better that made it feel, and now you have so much control of where you're aiming. And since I was already fiddling with aiming the character, I made a quick update to the dodge roll so you always face the direction you're diving, instantly making it feel better. And with that, I have to start making this video. If you liked it, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one where I add the first defensive building to help you protect your home.